Welcome to the Domvec podcast and to another episode of the College Creator Series. Bryce Feldmaier, known as BFELDY PSD by most individuals, is a graphic designer and content creator who attends Michigan State. Bryce's background in business, in which he is majoring in supply chain management, has allowed him to grow his company, Brigadebros Media, toward new heights. Creating graphics for some of the top businesses and schools in all of lacrosse has given Feldmaier the chance to expand and connect with a wider audience throughout and outside of the lacrosse landscape. How are you preparing for this year's recruiting cycle that begins on September 1st?
Kind of to start, just kind of looking at the general landscape of the recruiting class, kind of where the different regions are better this year. Say this year is pretty strong on the West Coast. So that's kind of where we're at right now. It doesn't get super in depth on our top guys until closer to September once all the rankings come out.
How did your passion for creating graphics begin?
So it started in high school, and at my school, we were required to take a art class. And I didn't want to draw or paint, so I ended up taking a graphic design class. Just kind of thought it'd be a class where I'd just get the A and move on. But I ended up being pretty decent at it. Kept with it, and then kind of started building a business out of it.
What is it? What is the process like creating a graphic for a client? Obviously, different clients can be, different on what they want, but kind of what's your general process and kind of how do you go about that?
Yeah, so each of our graphics are fully custom. We don't do templates. We have a similar style and theme though. So what players would do is they'll reach out to us on Instagram. We'll send them our prices. If they're interested, we'll send them our next step doc. Then after that, they'll send us email with details, the Venmo for payment, and then get them on our order list and through the process. So it's pretty straightforward. But on the creating side, where it's fully custom, so it's different per person.
What was kind of your decision not to, create a template, even though like sometimes, that can work? Was it kind of just you wanted to be like, a custom graphic and creative for each, different school or company that you work for?
Yeah, so for the custom stuff, I feel like when you're doing something from scratch every single time, it kind of makes the price like warranted on what it costs. Where sometimes template work, it can be cheaper for players, but when you're working with the highest level of players in the sport, you want to make something that's good for each individual athlete.
What are some of the challenges that you have faced creating content and creating edits in the past?
I'd say the biggest struggle I'd say the biggest struggle for a while was growth. I feel like we've kind of figured that one out. More recently, within the past year and a half, I'd say 2 years ago, we were at 1,300 followers, and now we're just over 11K. So that's the initial struggle. I feel like starting off, I'd say now it's just more the creative piece with making new things every time. Like this past fall, we did 90% of UNC's recruiting class. And so that 10th and 11th and 12th UNC edit that we had to do, um, each got more and more difficult. But I mean, as time moves on in the off season for recruiting, it gets easier because I learn new things and new styles, and then it kind of starts that struggle over back in the fall.
And as you elaborated on growth, what methods kind of did allow you to grow? Because going from as you said 1,300 to
Yeah.
11,000 in 2 years, that's a lot of growth. And for most people, like that's really large, but kind of how did you get that growth in the first place?
So the biggest thing was connections, just knowing different people in the lacrosse community. My brother is currently a senior at McDonough, just graduates this Friday. So with him being in a super strong high school program, kind of knowing the top athletes like Brendan Millen, Aiden Seibel, he played Hawks lacrosse, so guys like Robbie Hopper, Patrick Kelly. So we were kind of fortunate growing up in an area with a lot of high ranked lacrosse recruits, and that's a tough thing for people to replicate is just where you are. It's just kind of right place, right time.
Academically, you go to Michigan State. So why did you choose to go there, and what were some of the reasons why you made that decision?
Yeah, so we moved from Annapolis to Detroit 2 years ago. So being an in-state student was a big plus. There's kind of a big difference in tuition there, with being in and out of state, depending on where I ended up going. But my top choices were Michigan State, Indiana, and Tennessee. Those were my final three choices. And between alumni connections, having direct admit at the business school, and then just in-state tuition, those kind of push Michigan State over the edge over the other two.
Currently, do you do any edits or graphics for any Michigan State sports in general? I know you have seen some of your content for the Michigan State Club lacrosse team, but if you don't do any at this point, uh, are you planning to do any in the future, or is that kind of, for the people that kind of work specifically for the university?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, I work with the MCLA team. So that was a good season. Besides that, I don't really plan on getting into any Division 1 Michigan State sports. Just because if you're working for the university, it's their time and you're kind of an employee. Where with everything else, I get to pick my own hours. And with being a university employee as a student, most of the time your pay is pretty low on an hourly rate, probably 15, $16 an hour. So that amount compared to what I could make working with other companies and brands, it's just not something I'd go towards anymore.
What do you think helped you the most create the business that you have up to this point, at this point?
Yeah, I'd say definitely kind of being on edge. I'd say always being focused on continuing to grow the business, and kind of squeeze the avenues for kind of competition to grow. Not to say it in a cocky way, like competition is always needed to get better, um, but allowing that to not only continue to grow, but kind of expand the market for myself is kind of the biggest part.
Do you think your major has helped you in any way with the growth of the business or just expanding it?
A little bit, I'd say. I mean, supply chain is my major, supply chain management. So it's kind of dealing with business operations and kind of how a business functions. With where I am, I just finished my sophomore year, so I haven't gotten into major specific classes yet. So not a whole lot. It will definitely help in a year or two once I'm into those higher level courses. But currently not a ton now.
How do you manage your time making content as well as being a student at MSU?
It's a little difficult, in the fall, especially. I call it Hell Week. It's usually the second to fourth week in September. This year is the third week. It's where we get 80 orders in 1 week. Um, so managing time is always difficult. I'd say the easiest thing is just being organized. My brother runs kind of the communication side of the business, so he runs both the Instagram DMs and the emails now. And so when players email us, they get directed to Brett. And so that way we can go day by day and what each order is. And then just kind of your standard time management. Lot of late nights, I'd say. In the fall, especially, it's like 2, 3 a.m., sometimes an all-nighter every once in a while. Um, but that's kind of what you have to do to get things done. And luckily I haven't had any class that's taken up too much time where I'm like, nope, I've got to shut business down to focus on classes a lot more.
What is it like to have your brother, involved with the business so it's not, all on you?
It's been fun. At first, there were some hurdles, especially with him starting off. It was in October of his recruiting season, so he was kind of seeing all his friends committing while he was working the DMs and whatnot. But it's helped the business a lot. He's pitched some good ideas on different ways we can increase revenue, different ways we can grow the business, and then just taking the communication off my plate. When designing and going back and forth with an athlete, most of the time is spent just DMing back and forth. And for me to be able to take that off my plate and be able to pay him for it, it just saves me time and allow me to be able to finish more designs in that same amount of time.
What is it like to kind of create graphics and kind of be involved with other sports like football or soccer or basketball?
So football and basketball are a little difficult. some football players are fine, some are a little bit more difficult. Just because a lot of the athletes want stuff for free if they're a 3-star or higher. So most of the football players we work with aren't ranked players. They're going to smaller Division 1, Ivy League, Division 3. Basketball, we don't do a ton of basketball. We actually just today launched a new vertical into soccer. So we just formed that account today. And that's a pretty untapped market. So that's the one sport we're looking to get into more and more.
Do you want to expand on that? Kind of, what's your new account about, and
Yeah.
what do you want to move forward with it?
Yeah, so we just started it today. So it's another BFELDY branded account, same logo, same mission, but it's really focused just on soccer. We've had a lot of soccer players reaching out recently. A lot of D3. We've had a couple UVA kids. We've had we had a Georgetown kid about a month ago. Just had a University of Maryland kid. So we're starting to get bigger time recruits in the soccer space. And so it kind of felt like it was time to launch a new vertical under the BFELDY name, but not under the BFELDY PSD account, just because our follower base on BFELDY is so strong with lacrosse. Anytime I post something that's not lacrosse, the post compared to the lacrosse ones doesn't do very well. And so being able to push it on a different vertical and build that from scratch is going to allow the new account to be more soccer focused than trying to stuff soccer all over the BFELDY page.
And do you want it to kind of, obviously soccer is like international. Do you
Yeah.
plan on one day kind of doing stuff that's even more like, outside of the US for soccer?
Yeah, we've actually done stuff outside of the US for lacrosse too. A lot of Canadian players. I'd actually prefer not to for soccer. It gets a lot more complicated with payments and delivery times when it's international, whether it's time zone changes. If a kid's a soccer player in Europe, do they have Venmo? Most of the time they don't because it's only in the US and you're having to work with PayPal instead. Um, I prefer to keep it within the US for soccer. There's enough homegrown talent now in soccer to be able to grow the page where I'd like it to go. It's just difficult with the payment methods and the communication aspects to go international for soccer. Yeah. No.
Lastly, what are your professional goals moving forward in the future?
Yeah, so it's still kind of up in the air on what I want to do after school. I always say, like, when people ask me this question, like, if you asked me a year ago, I'd probably say just go into a normal kind of supply chain area job. Where now with the growth we've had the past 2 years, it's getting pretty realistic to continue this after school. So it's still up in the air. I'd say I'd be able to answer that a little bit better after this fall, but it's going in the direction I'd like it to go.
I just want to thank Bryce for his time and insight into what life is like for an individual who is creating content for so many companies and individuals at one single time. Bryce's social media handles we posted in the description. Like, comment, and subscribe to this channel and podcast. And lastly, have a great day and see you next time on the Dom Vec podcast.